Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Alex Davis is here, and when you hear about his story, you're going to hear, did he do this in 14 years? No, he did all these things in 4 years. So Alex is a 20-year-old who has published 4 books to Amazon. He's made 40K revenue in the last several months. He runs a podcast that has some amazing guests with all these guys you've heard of, like Brad Lee, Jeremy Miner, Gary Cardone, and more. And Alex is going to talk about what he's done, these companies that he's grown, how to get customers, grow on social media, start a business, so much more. You're going to be shocked and amazed at Alex's story and what he has to teach us. So, Alex, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, I appreciate you bringing me on. This is awesome.
And I appreciate you too. It's so important to make the time and effort to do the networking and meet people. And even in the immediate short term, sometimes it's easy to question and say, like, oh, well, can I put 20 minutes or an hour into this? But it's so important to involve the people. So I try to remind myself that. And so we talked you up a little bit. We introduced you, but in your own words, what are you all about? What's your focus? What's your passion, Alex?
Yeah, I love that. I love social media, but more deeply and more rooted in just who I am as a person. And I think that the audience can relate. The reason I do business is because when I was in senior year of college or high school, I was getting ready to go off and become a lawyer and honestly embark on a really difficult 8 years of college. And when you're at that point in life, I feel like you're not really ready to like jump into a huge commitment like that, and you're also kind of confused. But business in general is just like a huge opportunity and a vehicle that like is not very understood by a lot of people. People have a weird connotation around it. They might say like business is weird or it's stupid or it's a scam or it's risky. And I thought that for a long time. I thought that if you went to a business school, it was kind of like the rejects of high school who had nothing to do with their lives. You just go to business school and whatever, you just kind of like drink beer and you're at frat parties all the time. But in reality, I met a lot of mentors and they taught me a lot of things about business. So the reason I do everything is just in general, it has a lot of leverage, and business in general is one of the most leveraged vehicles out there. And we can talk about that more if you want to. But I spend all of my time reading and learning about this thing. And there's a quote that I like that says, in the beginning, you have to choose what you suck at. And I just don't want to suck when it comes to making money. And business is one of the things that allows me to really learn the process of making money. And at 20 years old, I can confidently say that I'm on that journey right now. And I'm very happy to be there. Yeah.
I love it. And this is inspiring so far. And some of these keywords, these concepts that you mentioned, it takes a lot of many like years of like deep thinking to really like process these things, like having your process and having leverage and trying to like growing something, right? Because it's really easy to just be an employee and clock in and clock out and trade your time for money. But then when you're a business builder, you have to think in these different terms, right? You have to think in terms of like the problems that I'm solving and seeking problems and then kind of multiplying my time. And so you've accomplished all these things. Like one thing that comes to mind is we were talking a few days ago about how you just sometimes you just keep building things up, right? You did all this endurance bike riding kind of stuff. And it seems like you've done the same with business. So as far as like you and your growth mindset and when you kind of strengthen the muscle, like what are you all about? Because it seems like maybe you're tapped into something that we all are not tapped into, this kind of like just like bettering your best on an epic scale. So am I on the right track there? Or just like
Yeah.
what sets you apart?
I love this. I actually spent a lot of time being introspective on the idea of, are human beings naturally equipped to do insane stuff, or is it just something that you grow into? And I remember when I was in elementary school, it was just eventually things would happen in my life, and I would realize like I can have the opportunity right now to go all in and go insanely deep on this thing. And at the time, I had no idea where it would lead. But I remember like seventh grade was this like deciding year where you either go and you become like this enriched advanced math student and science student and you're going to be the top of your class. You have to take all these tests and get these insane grades, or you're kind of just like average. And for some reason at seventh grade, I was really pushing to be in this like top tier thing. But at the time, the energy of excelling in a weird way just didn't apply to business or life in a positive construct. And yes, like academics was a huge heavy factor in that. But I remember back in seventh grade that was happening. That was a huge thought process. And then once I found business, I just clicked into it. So people listening, if they're already like, I wouldn't say lazy or they're like kind of slower, I don't know if it is a learned behavior. Like, I don't know who I learned it from. I honestly might have said, like, yes, it was my dad because he would just constantly force me into environments where it was like either sink or swim. You're either going all in or you're out. And that kind of like forced me to become this way. But I think that people that are listening, yeah, it allows the shortening of ability to do stuff in a really short period of time, like a concept I love. If you could define any of what I just said into a word, speed of implementation, just taking a huge idea and just like incorporating it today, not waiting a week or a month, or just doing it end of day rather than end of week.
I love that speed of implementation. And there's been so many times when I would think about something more than I actually did it, good or bad, right? Like there might be that task we're putting off and we spend 3 months just delay, and then it only took
Yeah,
10 minutes to get it done. And it's like, if only you just had done it first, you wouldn't have to put yourself through all that. But it also applies positively as well. If we have a dream or a project or a business we want to build, if we just put some time into making just like a proof of concept minimum viable product, then we could see some initial results and contact just a few leads, call 10 people, put in 10
yeah,
minutes, and then you yourself get more excited about what happens. And then it ends up being cyclical. And even like some when you're recounting about what your mindset was at different ages, that concept came into my mind. Like this idea about how like when you're up until you're maybe like 8 or 10, you don't even really know what's going on, right? You're like
yeah,
you're not even
yeah,
putting on your own pants. But then
yeah,
once you get to that 12, 13, the puberty years, that's kind of when you begin to be able to make your own choices. Like, well, in school, like what sports, what clubs am I going to go to? And then it seems like that kind of like age like 13 to 16 is really your prime time to figure out what you want to do. And then after that, it's like branching off into the adult years, and then it's like
yeah.
way too many possibilities. And so you're still a super young guy, and you've just accomplished so many things. And so what have you built? Like, what are these businesses that you've grown, and what's come of them?
I love that. This podcast, I think, is like heavily on business and marketing. So we'll start with that. I have a marketing agency that I built when I was 17. And to date, I've built, 5 to 10 brands that have done millions of views online, hundreds of thousands of followers, or even some that just have 1,000 followers plus. And that's all through short form content. So I'm huge into just short form videos. When I was, 14, 15, I had a photography business that was like going around taking senior photos, weddings, events, things in my local area. I didn't even know what business was at the time, but I had a really, really successful business. I was getting calls like every single weekend. Please come take my photos, whatever you charge, we'll pay for it. And I was like, all right. I was kind of lazy, like as far as like getting leads and stuff like that. I didn't understand what a pipeline was or anything. I was just showing up and doing it. But that has transcended into the short form content because the camera skill now works in short form. And then I also have a Facebook group with 7,000 people that I coach for free, teaching them how to build an agency. And some of them really, really like me. So I spend a lot of time vetting them, interviewing them. And I have 50 students that I like really love, and they've paid me a lot of money. And I have helped them grow their agency. And that is called The First Client. I have thefirstclient.com, and all I do is build their agency to the point where they have their first client in less than 30 days. So that's been a really like strong success. And then the other things you've mentioned, I've published 4 books and done other various things on the side, which is also, kind of off on a tangent. But those are like the 2 things I'm like really, really proud of in the kind of in the season that I'm in right now that I'm focusing on.
Nice. So you provided a service and you didn't overthink it. You went out and got some clients, and then you kept with it and kept with
Yeah.
the dedication and the action and the thinking. So that way it could evolve into something, which has evolved into the firstclient.com. And then you're also doing a lot of things right, like documenting what you're doing. And then that's the books become easy when you document,
Mm,
right? When you
yeah.
write down what you do, because then it's just a matter of kind of shaping, forming what you make. And so as far as the secrets to social media, it's like for a guy like me, I've seen all these platforms like come and go, and there's been so much to like learn and unlearn, and platforms crash and burn and other ones come in. And it seems like there's a lot of these like universal ideas though. Like you said, the short form content, because that way there's like the watch time and the engagement. And then you always hear about social media, how important it is to stay dedicated and like post every day and always be
Yeah.
responding. But like, what would you say are the real secrets to social media? Like, why do some people really suck at it, and why are some people awesome at it like you are?
I wouldn't say I'm awesome at it, but I would say that I understand why I do it. And I think people just generally, when you don't dial into why you're doing something, you have no purpose to keep doing it. So people who have a business or want to have a business, in order for you to make money, you need customers. That means human beings have to pay you. And there's not many people who know you currently. There's a lot more people who don't know you. So your only option is to contact them directly using your phone, like texting them, emailing them, calling them, which takes a lot of work and time. And they don't know who you are, which takes convincing and manipulation on some level. Or you can make free content with your phone and you can post it. And that content can get views. And those views could be leveraged 10 views, 100 views, a million views to a massive audience who will eventually buy your product. And that's the reason I'm in social media. And most people don't know that. They're like, okay, I'm just going to have followers. And it's not about that. It really has nothing to do with followers or views or anything like that. But at the same level, 7 years ago when I started doing YouTube, I just, for some reason, when I was like unable to think and be conscious about anything else, I just wanted to make YouTube videos. So like that kind of has transcended and followed through. But today, like I would tell every business owner, get a podcast. Like having this show allows you to bring massive guests on and just talk about anything. Like Brad Lee or Jeremy Lee Minor, these guys, like start with that if you don't want to do social media content. If you have money, invest in allowing somebody to clip this stuff up. A lot of my friends from like the Indy Elliott team or just other entrepreneurs from events, like pay me money to just clip up their podcasts because they don't want to do it. So like I get the hassle of like, oh, I can't stay consistent with posting. I would honestly say like if that's who you are, don't worry about it. Like don't, unless you really want to get into it and you want to be consistent, just do what you love to do and do what you're already doing that you're good at, and then pay for somebody to do this. And if you can't pay them, then I would say at least try to commit to one video a day and use your phone, make it super simple, streamline the process. And as far as what you originally said, I'm sorry, I'm going on like a tangent right now.
No, this is great.
The secret to success with social media now is short form content. I don't know what it will be in 5, 10 years, but as far as going viral, it's like massive. The formula that Hermosa uses, like hook, retain, reward, like getting them in 3 seconds with a massive hook, and then retaining them with like a deep level of value, and then at the end rewarding them with a payoff, and then maybe you could add the call to action if you want to sell them something, and we could go deeper on that if you want to.
Yeah, that would be great because it's like you said, every few years it just seems like the whole worldwide humanity algorithm changes and the same copywriting steps and principles are the same, like hook them first and keep them watching a few more seconds and then give them the value like the bucket brigade concept. And it's like it's just amazing how it used to be like web pages would be like a mile long, right? And there'd be like a logo and a headline and the debt copy and all these things. And it's like as things have become maybe more crowded and the cell phones have gotten better and more people using their cell phones instead of a computer, things have been gotten more condensed, but it's still the same kind of building blocks principles. And so yeah, tell us about when you make some of the short form content. It's easy. I mean, it takes a while to get your head around this because you're like, oh, 1 minute video. But then when you're like, well, 3 seconds of this and 15 seconds of that, then it makes a lot more sense and it's doable because of the structure, some of the decisions are removed. So yeah, tell us about when you make some short form content, like what goes through your head and what are you doing and not doing when making these?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good question. Um, when I started 4 years ago doing this stuff, and I'm not like a master at it. I know friends who have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, and that kind of like pushes me and envies me to do better. I would start with that, like get people who are actually doing this stuff at a massive scale and talk to them in person, not on Zoom calls. I just met somebody at my college who's like blowing up on social media, and their advice is changing the whole way I'm doing content. And I've done this for 4 years, like the short form specifically. Now I'm like changing the process. But when I used to make content, this is the process. I'd set up my camera, I'd sit there, I wouldn't script it out, I'd press the start button, and I would have 1 minute to say whatever I was going to say. I would think of a concept, like let's say it's happiness, and I would rant on happiness. But the main part that I think is like prevalent when you do like, we call it talking head content, which I would say is dried up now, but is the hook. I would start with like, you could go on Google, just like Google massive hook ideas or anything like that. But if you want to synthesize it into a framework, it's just trying to flip it in a way that makes people feel that you know something that they don't know and that they are wrong for feeling the way that they do. And so when you tell them the hook of the idea that they're going to say, you're literally pausing their brain and telling them to stop scrolling, because if they don't watch what you're going to say, the next video after it, they might feel bad about not watching yours, or this is like the thing they need to focus on right now. And that has helped me, at least with clients and stuff, create hooks and things that actually do like carry a lot of views. And then there's like a bunch of nuance, like little algorithmic things. Like sometimes they like 5 second videos, sometimes they like 15-second videos. That's like way too like advanced because that changes all the time. But in general, I think that people just they'll pay attention to things if you speak directly to them. And the way you can do that is by saying that you know something that they don't know, and also like even using the words they or you or and not the word I when you speak in the content. Because if you say I've done this, I've done that, it's like okay, cool, bye. You need to be watching this for this reason, and this is going to change your life for this reason, whatever. That's like a huge mental shift that I'm like working on now.
That's great. And that whole you concept, I mean, that's like copywriting 101, right? And it's so easy to let the high school English class get stuck in your mind because man, in school they teach you to say everyone and people and all and be real vague. And
Yeah,
it's like no, it's about you. And then I like how your mindset there of saying, well, you're thinking about this wrong because it has so much built into it, right? It
yeah,
has the pattern interrupt built in, there's a problem that's embedded in there, and then probably somewhat of a solution as much as you can take out of there in a minute. And then also, I imagine that when we're telling people to maybe record a 1 minute video per day, at first it sounds, oh, that's so easy. I can find a minute. But then we all know that if someone is not in practice, if they're not in shape, if the muscle's not built up, then they might try they might make a few attempts, right? It might be frustrating at first, but then I
yeah,
imagine that as someone makes this a habit, then when they're recording and they see like the little circle thingy filling up and it gets to the halfway, then their brain kind of begins to form the pathways and say like, okay, here's what I can fit into a minute. When it's getting to the halfway point, I better start wrapping it up. So I imagine that this 1 minute video idea might at first seem way too easy, and then they start doing it and it seems way too hard and they might want to give up. But then as they go through the repetitions, then it will probably become more intuitive and repeatable and doable as long as they persist and kind of listen to your advice and start with some of these ideas in the framework and Google the list for hooks. And then after a while, they'll kind of absorb it, and then it'll be easier moving forward.
yeah. I love that. It was a good way to lay it out. The thing I would add to it too is just we need to find activities that we can incorporate to our daily lives that we can stack on top of what we're already doing to make it sustainable for the long run so that we don't stop doing it. So instead of making content every week, what I started with was making content one day for the entire month. And I would sit in front of the camera and I wouldn't leave on a Sunday of the first month. And I would just batch out a bunch of content. It was like the craziest concept that opened my mind. And that just meant I would sit there, I would press record, I would talk, I would stop the camera, I'd probably like freak out and swear a bit, and then I would press record and I would do it again, and I would do it again, and I would do it to the point where I was literally brain fried. I'd go get some water, come back, and finish it out. But I had content for the rest of the month. And then you don't have to think about it. You just upload the videos onto a Google Drive, you download them, you put them into an editor. There's auto captions like crazy all over the place. You can auto caption it, And then once you've done that, you can download that file and post it to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And that seems to be like the easiest solution. The only thing I would say is talking head content is drying up. And I've noticed that like across the board, unless you're like someone that's like saying new information that no one's ever heard before, it's hard to blow up and go viral on that, which means you have to create new organic creative content, which just takes a lot of time. And that's constantly flowing. You have to make it on the spot or whatever, plan it out, which takes work. And most people don't have the time to do that.
But I think in order to get that part figured out, that's where it comes in when you say to surround yourself with these successful people like your up and coming viral star university friends, and then also be following these big accounts and just kind of seeing like what are they doing that
Yeah.
others aren't. Like, I mean, with Hormozy, like I don't like his books, but I love his short form videos so much. And he'll be like sitting in a chair and saying something, and then it'll be cut to over something else. And I'm like, okay, that's getting my attention a lot more than just one single person just sort of sitting there. And so, before we wrap things up, I want to make sure that we get like a really good piece of advice that you've learned because you've talked to these guys like Brad Lee and Jeremy Minor, and I know that you're tight in a way with Cardone. And man, some of the little nuggets from Cardone, like I think I heard once he said he walked into every business in Miami, like all of them. And with that guy's energy, like 100% believe it. So with all these successful guys that you've connected with and talked to, is there like a number one piece of advice or something that really like surprised you that you feel like passing along?
Frameworking. This is odd and it's kind of out of context. And I know that the advice you might be looking for might be like a first principles thing, but frameworking is huge. And this also can come down to language too. When you hear me speak, I try my best to not say the word to not say the word like, to enunciate the words that I'm using and be intentional about it. But that is a side tangent. Frameworking, when I talked to Brad, I was asking what makes Hermosi so like explosive on the internet. The guy hasn't even been here for that long. He's been posting content for a long, long time, but the way and the style in which he brings the energy to the internet, it's just his virality has gone insanely massive, and he's crossed people who've been in the space for years. And when I say frameworking, I mean like let's take the word leads, and he has a whole book on leads, and most people do write books too. But the way in which he explains concepts, it's like if you want to get a lead, we have to define what a lead is. Then, if I'm going to tell you how to get a lead at the very simplest level, like get a computer. What is a computer? You're going to figure like explain to them what a computer is. Then once they have a computer and they know how much to spend on a computer, you have to turn it on. You have to press this button. Then you have to go to Google, search Facebook.com. Like the fact that you can take something, a really complex topic, and break it down so that anybody with a brain that can read or hear or listen or see what you're doing can follow along, it makes it impossible to fail. And people at all levels now can relate and resonate with the content. And even somebody who's super advanced can be like, wow, I appreciate that because it's an easy way to explain a difficult thing. And business is really difficult. And coming from a 20-year-old who's never been in business, I didn't know how to make money. I had no idea what I was doing. But hearing what an offer was, I was like, okay, that's kind of a new thing. I don't know how to incorporate it, but he frameworks it so good and simplifies it. And now I'm like, okay, I understand it. Leads, boom. And now I have a company that does this thing. And I can zoom out and I can look at the entire system of business and I can see click to close how it works. I can see from the very start to the very end of business the process. And when people ask me how it works, I can explain it to them and articulate it properly, and then they can understand it too. And before it was kind of like, I don't know, I think you get like an LLC or something. And then it's like, what is an LLC? And I'm like, I don't know. But like, I understand things now. So frameworking is huge. And in your own business, like when people think about you and your brand and they think about your name and they think about your color scheme and everything, I think they also think about the concepts that you bring to the table because we can't keep reinventing things, but all these self-help guys, business guys have their own twist on words and phrases and quotes. But just in general, Harmozy has the value, like the value ladder, the value equation. He has the four core components, the lead getters. Like you can think about the frameworks he's invented and you can like appreciate those. So in my business, I'm trying to framework everything. I have like equations and formulas that are really, really, really dialed in and very generic that I spend, 8, 10 hours on building. so that when I talk to people, it's just like clicked in the brain and then I can hand it to them. That's like the biggest thing I would say. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that's very powerful. And I think that a lot of what you said in there is there's the essence on the simplicity of it all, right? Because at first you hear framework, you think I need to add 37 steps, but even some of that Hormozy stuff is there's four quadrants. And you're giving me a flashback. You were talking about sixth grade, seventh grade. There was a sixth grade math class where they gave us an assignment where they said, write down in step-by-step instructions on how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. And when you're 10 years old, you're like, oh, easy, bread, jam. And they say, no, no, no. You have to get the plate. You have to get the knife. You have to get the jar. You have to open it. And then as you write down these instructions, you realize, okay, now it's too verbose. Now it's too detailed. Now I have to simplify it. And then maybe I have to make another pass and say, you forgot this step, and to maybe repeat or mention an instruction another time to make sure that it's idiot proof, bulletproof. So there's a lot of like refinement, and
Yeah.
explaining doesn't mean that it has to be overloading and complex. And when you go and back and reiterate, then you might have to reduce and simplify. But as far as your business goes, that's great because that means that when you repeat, you know what you're doing, you can easily explain it, you get known for it, and then you have this start to finish process, and then that becomes your branding and your concepts and your keywords and all that
Yeah.
cool stuff. So I find that very powerful to figure out because people pay lip service to these ideas like your brand or your system, but I think framework is a really cool idea because your mind automatically thinks, okay, what's the acronym? Does it spell something out? Is it easy to remember? So there's so
Yeah.
much built into that. And so as far as us just giving people a taste of you and leaving them hungry or thirsty and wanting more, we gave so many ideas, but we want people to go to your site and go to your podcast and find out what you're all about. So we mentioned a little while ago the firstclient.com, but tell us about some next steps here. If someone was super impressed by Mr. Alex Davis, where should they go at this point?
You can go to my Instagram. It's just Alexander K. Davis. And as far as projects I'm working on, I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm applying all the short form content ideas that I have to Savannah, Georgia. I'm not going to say a lot, but I'm just going to say, like, watch out because, a few years from now, I think the economy and the small businesses in this town will be a lot different. And they're already growing, but I want to really light that on fire. So
Nice. You will make Savannah your town. Maybe they'll name a street or a neighborhood after you or something. And I can say I knew you way back when. And so as
oh
we go
boy.
to Instagram and check you out, I want to make sure that we end the podcast with a bang instead of a whimper. So with all the things you've seen and done and people you've come across, I know you already shared so many lessons, but is there a singular quote or lesson that you can give us to really wrap things up, to leave us excited and motivated? What comes to mind as far as a quote or lesson?
Most people die at 25 but aren't buried until 75.
I like that one. I've heard that one. So we need to live that varied life and pursue excellence and push ourselves to do better, course correct, adjust with the feedback, and get to that next step in our evolution, whatever it may be. So, Mr. Alex Davis, it's been a blast talking with you. I myself have like 15, 18 ideas floating around in my head as far as things I need to go back to do and think about with my short form content, and especially how all the successful content creators I know have these content days, have this time blocked out. They do the batching. They know when they're in the peak state, to use the Tony Robbins framework idea, and they go and they say, I'm turned on and I'm focused on making these 20 videos. And then that way they have the content runway and then they can switch gears and do other things. And so that way they make the best use of their time. That way they can have this 4 year block where just amazing things have happened. And so it's time to check out Alex Davis. What you said, it was Alexander K. Davis at Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. And then the firstclient.com. And Mr. Alex, it's been a blast speaking with you on a Saturday morning, but we're also applying the Grant Cardone sort of technique of saying, well, everyone else takes the weekend off, and why not put in something on the weekends when everyone else is sleeping? So we're both a couple of workaholic in a good way, action taker type of guys. Great speaking with you, Alex.
I appreciate it, Robert. Thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
Likewise.